Dealing with the Americans is a challenge because if you disagree with the Americans, life becomes difficult in dealing with anybody. No one wants to touch you, which is a fundamental problem. In 1 year, when they wanted us to not to buy oil from Iran, which we have never bought since then, we then said, okay, can we get a quota? They then said, okay, you can get the quota. We agreed to go and get this quota. Do you know? No one would ship it. No one would insure it. So the significance of that is not only between us and the American, is the implications of market sentiment across the globe for South Africa. That's the significance of that meeting.
My people, we need to talk. At a recent post-budget event, South Africa's Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, made a statement that was unusual. He said, quote, "If you disagree with the Americans, life becomes difficult in dealing with anybody. No one wants to touch you." Well, he wasn't speaking hypothetically, because just days after President Ramaphosa's tense White House meeting with President Trump, South Africa has started bending, quietly shifting economic and foreign policy positions in hopes of stabilizing its relationship with the U.S. And of course, yes, to appease both Trump and Elon Musk. Let's start with what's happening. South Africa has proposed importing $1 billion worth of U.S. liquefied natural gas annually in exchange for duty-free access for its steel, aluminum, and vehicle exports. It's also reportedly toned down its criticism of Israel, despite filing a genocide case against the country at the International Court of Justice, in what insiders say is a calculated effort to soften its global image and realign with U.S. interests. Now, if this was a two-way negotiation where both nations were compromising to try and reach common ground, it might be understandable, but no. Washington hasn't budged. It's South Africa that's pulling all its cards on the table. Now, we'll break all of that down on another episode, but today, I want to zero in on one card in particular, Elon Musk. For years, Elon Musk's Starlink has been blocked from operating in South Africa. Why? Because of the country's Black economic empowerment laws. Rules that say that if you want to do business here in South Africa, 30% of your local subsidiary must be Black owned. Elon didn't like that. He called it discriminatory. And instead of adjusting his model to fit the law, he complained loudly. And now, suddenly, just days after Ramaphosa's heated meeting with Trump in Washington, the South African government has proposed a policy shift that will exempt foreign tech companies from the 30% BEE equity laws, offering what they are calling alternative compliance instead. Translation: if you don't want to give up equity, just throw some money into a few local programs and we'll call it even. Now, South Africa's communications minister says, no, this isn't about Elon Musk. According to him, it's just about, quote, making the country more attractive for tech investment. But the timing couldn't be more suspicious. Just days after that messy meeting with Trump, and suddenly the rules are starting to shift. And you want us to believe that it's a coincidence? And here's where it gets really interesting. There were whispers before that meeting in D.C. that Ramaphosa had already offered Musk a deal. We reported it right here on the breakdown. A quiet backroom arrangement to cool tensions with the U.S. and avoid diplomatic fallout. So Ramaphosa flies to Washington hoping to reset the relationship. And what does he get? Trump goes full white grievance on live TV, pulling out photos to prove white genocide in South Africa. Photos that weren't even from South Africa, but from the Congo, according to multiple reports. The hypocrisy, the disrespect, the absolute gaslighting, broadcast for the world to see. And yet, somehow, South Africa is still the one bending. South Africa is the one rewriting its own equity laws for a billionaire who won't share ownership with the very people the law was meant to empower. So today on The Breakdown, we're asking, why is South Africa bending its own laws to please Musk and Trump? What does this move signal for the rest of the continent, especially when it comes to economic justice, tech sovereignty, and foreign influence? And if rules can be bent for billionaires, what happens to the people those rules were designed to protect? Because make no mistake, if this precedent stands, the door is wide open. And the people who fought for economic freedom, they might be the ones locked out. We're going to break it all the way down. But before we dive in, a big welcome to all of our new subscribers and members. I'm so glad you're here. And if you're watching and haven't joined us yet, please consider this your personal invitation and help us get to 200,000 subscribers. Because here at Pan Genius TV, we're not just building a channel. We're creating a global home for Black stories that are told with truth, intention, and power. And if that speaks to you, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and drop us super thanks. Or consider joining our membership community where we go beyond the headlines with exclusive content, behind-the-scenes conversations, and a front row seat to the dialogue shaping our future. All right, now let's get into it. So let's take a look at this report of what's actually happening on the ground.
Thanks for joining us. South Africa's communications minister is standing firm. Solly Malatsi is insisting that the country is not relaxing its black economic empowerment laws for tech giants like Elon Musk's Starlink. It comes after backlash over policy changes he put forward that would allow communications companies like Starlink to bypass equity rules. The communications minister had been facing Parliament. He's been accused of not consulting the ANC before putting the draft policy out for debate. Tom Canetti is at the Parliament in Cape Town.
So the minister said the reason for this draft policy recommendation was to open up South Africa's market to companies like Starlink from the US, which he said has the best and most progressive technology in the sector at the moment. Obviously, what's prohibiting that from happening is black economic empowerment laws here, which one speaker backed up the minister, questioning the efficacy of those laws, saying that they only benefit a small few, noting an example of a 1 trillion rand being pumped into BEE laws to only benefit about 100 people. But the heart of the debate was about sort of grilling the minister for not first off consulting the ANC before making this policy recommendation and being accused of succumbing to pressure from Washington to sort of rewrite South Africa's transformative laws without first of all consulting the right parties in South Africa first of all. Another speaker noted that the telecommunications industry is one of the least transformed since the transition to democracy in terms of black ownership. And another noted the national security potential threat by giving Elon Musk so much control over the sector, and giving the example of Musk sort of indirectly threatening to shut off Starlink on the Ukrainian front earlier this year. Now, the minister sort of ended this debate by saying that he will follow the right process and take any comments about the draft, the policy recommendation into consideration.
Now let's get into the facts and give this the true context that it deserves. Under South Africa's current black economic empowerment regulations, foreign companies, if they want to operate in the country, must have 30% local black ownership in their South African subsidiary. That's not a suggestion. That's the law. You might ask, but why does this law exist in the first place? Great question. Well, it was established as a direct response to centuries of legalized theft. Because under apartheid, and before that, under British colonial rule, Black South Africans were systematically excluded from owning land, running businesses, holding capital, or participating in the economy beyond cheap labor. By the time apartheid ended in 1994, the numbers were staggering. Less than 2% of the country's economy was controlled by the Black majority. Think about that. So BEE was introduced in the early 2000s as a tool, not just for access, but for redress. It said, if you want to do business in this country, you can't just profit off the land and labor. You need to invest in Black ownership, skills, and yes, wealth creation. At its core, BEE was about economic justice and equity, not just helping Black people get jobs, but helping Black people own the means of production and create generational wealth. Now, yes, BEE has its critics. Some say it's been exploited by political elites. Some say it hasn't reached the grassroots. And they're right. Implementation has been flawed. But let's not confuse a flawed tool with a failed mission. Because the goal of BEE is still urgent: to dismantle apartheid economics and replace it with something more just, more inclusive. Now enter Elon Musk's Starlink company, a satellite internet company that is promising fast, affordable broadband, especially in underserved rural areas. Sounds great, right? But here's the catch. Starlink hasn't launched in South Africa because Elon, who is South African, refuses to comply with BEE. He said it publicly, called the laws discriminatory. Basically, I'm not giving up any ownership, not even a little. So what's the government doing? Well, instead of standing firm, the Communications Ministry just proposed something called equity equivalent compliance. It means if a foreign company doesn't want to give up equity, it can now contribute, and that's in quote, to local economic development projects instead. So rather than giving up 30% of the business, you can fund some training programs, donate to a local startup accelerator, build some Wi-Fi towers, and boom, you're in.
It is a massive fight in South Africa's parliament. In fact, Solly Malatsi's deputy, Kusela Diko of the ANC, is openly dragging him on Twitter. This is a real big one and is set to divide opinion because Elon Musk is so divisive, because bending BEE laws for anybody, but particularly for a white man who has spent the last few years of his life absolutely bashing South Africa's public reputation, spreading disinformation, fake news, and nonsense about South Africa, and actively trying to undermine and meddle with South Africa's democratically elected government. To bend the rules for him seems wild.
Sounds harmless? Think again. This isn't some neutral policy update. This is a structural shift, one that weakens the core principle of BEE: ownership, control, and long-term wealth building for Black South Africans. Let's be real. Development projects come and go, but ownership, that builds generational power. And once you let one billionaire through the side door, you better believe others will follow. So when the government says this isn't about Starlink, you have to ask, then why now? Why Musk? Why after Trump's so-called white genocide rant? The dots are not that hard to connect, my people, because that is the same thing Trump and his MAGA cult are championing here in the U.S.
In national news, a key promise Donald Trump made on the campaign trail was to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins joins us from Washington with a look at what's been done on this issue as Trump marks 100 days in office.
President Trump wasted no time shutting down federal DEI programs.
The first item that President Trump is signing is the rescission of 78 Biden-era executive actions.
On day one, just hours after taking the oath of office, Trump signed an executive order eliminating all Biden-era DEI programs from the federal government. The following day, Trump directed the Office of Personnel Management to notify the heads of agencies and departments to close all DEI offices. He also signed another executive order ending DEI hiring at the FAA.
You only want the best and the brightest, because that's what takes you home to your family.
Trump issued more executive orders aimed at ending alleged sex and race-based discrimination through DEI programs in the workplace and schools. In February, the Department of Education warned state education boards they need to remove DEI policies or risk losing federal funding.
They're allowing people into school that can't do math, and yet kids who've worked really hard and #1 in their class in a high school someplace in New Jersey or in Mississippi, they can't get into the best schools.
After Trump's election and before he took office, the FBI took it upon themselves to shutter the Bureau's DEI office. The Department of Defense recently created a task force to assess progress of eliminating DEI in the armed forces.
Secretary Hegseth has completely wiped out DEI from the Pentagon as well, and so he's going to remain focused on standing up for our war fighters.
The private sector seemingly taking the government's lead. Since Trump won the 2024 election, Meta, McDonald's, Ford, John Deere, Lowe's, and Toyota all canceling their DEI programs.
Strip down equity, reframe justice as discrimination, and sell it to the public as, quote, fairness. Under Trump's influence, we've seen all-out war on diversity, equity, and inclusion, from universities to boardrooms, executive orders to eliminate federal DEI training, lawsuits targeting Black women business grants, Republican governors banning so-called woke curriculums, and slashing funding for programs that even mention systemic racism. They're not just rolling back DEI. They're reframing any attempt to level the playing field as an attack on white people. That's the game. And now we're seeing those same arguments. BEE is racist. We're being excluded. We just want a fair shot. Creep into the global south. The irony? The very countries that built their wealth off of colonizing Black and brown people are now crying foul when the colonized ask for a stake in their own economies. So whether it's Trump getting DEI in America, or Musk resisting Black ownership in South Africa, or Ramaphosa's government quietly rewriting the rules for tech billionaires, it's all part of the same global trend. A coordinated backlash against racial justice, a rebranding of equity as extremism, and a dangerous normalization of the idea that billionaires deserve a free pass, while the people who were historically excluded are told to be patient again. So no, this isn't just a Starlink story, my people. This is a warning sign for every country on the continent. If you bend the rules for one, the foundation wouldn't hold for long. Now let's talk about the fallout, because South Africans are watching this unfold in real time, and not everyone's buying the spin. Some folks are serious. They see this as a billionaire tantrum being rewarded, a government backpedaling on its own transformation laws to make one powerful man happy, while millions of South Africans are still waiting for real change, real access, real equity. Let's be honest. People fought and died for economic liberation. BEE wasn't perfect, but it was supposed to be a tool for leveling the playing field. And now, a government that claims to be pro-Black empowerment is saying, well, maybe empowerment can come in the form of charity instead of ownership. That's not empowerment. That's a discounted deal on justice. And it's not just the public. Politicians are speaking out too. Some ANC members are trying to play it safe, saying this is about tech growth. But others, and the EFF in particular, an opposition party, they are calling it what it is, a betrayal. Take a listen to this.
Well, let's stay with this story. The economic freedom fighters are threatening legal action over reports that South Africa is planning to offer tech billionaire Elon Musk a special workaround to BEE laws. The party says the decision is unconstitutional and will compromise the country's sovereignty. Let's get some detail now on this, and we're joined by EFF spokesperson Snow Tambo. Mr. Tambo, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. You ask a particular question in your statement, and that is that why is Elon Musk, who claims that there is a genocide in South Africa, why would he be so desperate to invest in a country such as that? Do you want to answer that question?
Greetings, Colin, greetings to the viewers. I think it's up to him to answer because he has been at the forefront of propagating the lie that there is a massacre and genocide of white people in South Africa in order to leverage preferential treatment and access to the South African market for his Starlink satellite company. So I think it is best placed for him to answer to us as to why is he so interested in running Starlink in a country that he says white people are experiencing a genocide in. Because if this deal that they are said to be making with Cyril Ramaphosa and the people who have gone there to negotiate with the Trump administration to sort of reset our relations passes through, one wonders whether Elon Musk is going to continue to propagate the lie that there's a white genocide in South Africa when his company is able to operate in South Africa. If he was a true humanitarian, if he was someone who was genuinely concerned about the well-being of Afrikaners in South Africa, he would be calling for sanctions on South Africa, he'd be calling for disinvestment in South Africa, but he's running a parallel campaign to install Starlink into a country that he claims is a genocide in. So it would be interesting to hear whether the negotiations in Washington will answer that question as well.
EFF leaders have warned that this opens the door to tech colonialism, where foreign companies get full control, full profits, and leave South Africa with scraps in the name of development. They're even threatening legal action, saying the decision is unconstitutional and will compromise the country's sovereignty. Even civil society groups and policy experts are chiming in, saying this move sets a dangerous precedent that could hollow out BEE from the inside. And then there's the flip side. You've got a segment of the public saying, but we need internet. We need progress. They're pointing to how Starlink could transform rural access, connect schools, drive innovation. And listen, we get it. Access matters. But here's the real question. Do we have to sell out economic justice to get it? Because if the cost of high-speed internet is surrendering our laws, our principles, and our long fight for equity, then maybe we need to rethink who's benefiting from this so-called progress. So let's take a step back, because what's happening in South Africa is not just a local issue. It's a continental alarm bell. If the most legislatively advanced country in Africa, the one that pioneered economic redress through BEE, is willing to water it down for a tech billionaire, what message does that send to the rest of the continent? It says we're open for business as long as you've got enough money to skip the rules. It says our sovereignty is negotiable if your last name is Musk or Trump. And it risks turning Africa's economic future into a playground for foreign capital, where our laws become suggestions and our people are once again pushed to the sidelines in the name of progress. Let's be real, my people. Starlink won't be the last. If this loophole works in South Africa, you better believe other countries will come under pressure to do the same. Losing land laws for foreign agribusiness, cut corners for oil companies in exchange for infrastructure, bend procurement rules to attract investors. And all of it will come wrapped in the language of innovation, growth, and partnership, while sidestepping ownership, equity, and accountability. But here's the deeper danger, my people. If Africa starts trading sovereignty for tech, if we prioritize access over agency, If we let billionaires become the new colonizers, this time in Silicon Valley hoodies instead of British uniforms, then we're not building the Africa we deserve. We're just coding a new kind of dependency. This is the time for clarity, for unity, for policy that's bold and unapologetic about who it's meant to empower. Because Africa doesn't just need faster internet. It needs a future that belongs to its people.
You also say that Starlink would represent a threat to the local tech industry and national security. Just bring us into the picture here. How is it a threat to the local industry, but also importantly, and perhaps quite prominent, is this matter around it representing a threat to national security?
Look, I think the first part, Chloe, speaks to local industries, speaks to the fact that there's no indication as to how many jobs the Starlink enterprise would create in South Africa. And one knows that it would be operating remotely and based in the United States of America as part and parcel of the Silicon Valley conglomerate of tech giants that operate from the United States of America. So they would be operating from a satellite in the sky, running it from the United States of America, and undercutting the local telecommunications industry. So the EFF met with MTN, one of the telecommunicators here in South Africa as well, and they raised that concern with us. And that meeting spoke to many issues, such as our call for the ending of expiry of data as well. But one thing they raised sharply is that there would be a threat to jobs if there was an introduction of a remotely run Starlink satellite company in South Africa. And it's something that we must take into serious consideration, because American companies that come and set up in South Africa do not ordinarily create jobs. And there's no blueprint as to how Starlink would do that in South Africa. The second part, as it relates to national security, Elon Musk has been at the forefront of running a disinformation campaign that seeks to delegitimize South Africa's position of calling out Israel's genocide against the people of Palestine. So they want to say that we are committing a genocide so that our voice loses moral credibility to expose the genocide being perpetuated by Israel. So if someone of that stature, that nature, and who's been conducting such activities, and even recently there was exposés by American media outlets that he has manipulated the artificial intelligence function called Grok on the X platform that he owns to perpetuate the lie that there is a white genocide in South Africa. So if he can do that to instill a campaign against our nation, how much more when he's going to have access to our data through a telecommunications company and control our telecommunications sphere through a satellite? So that poses a national security risk that must be averted.
And right there lies the real danger of what South Africa is doing. But my people, let's be clear. As I said, this moment right here, it's not just about Starlink. It's not even just about South Africa. It's about who gets to shape the future of this continent. It's about whether Africa will be a place of policy, rules, and law, or a playground for profit. Because what we're seeing now is a dangerous pattern. Foreign pressure, corporate interests, and leaders bending instead of yielding. And that's how it always starts. One exception, one loophole, one deal behind closed doors, until suddenly the laws meant to empower the people, they're gutted, they're hollow, they're performative, they mean absolutely nothing. So here's the real question. Are we going to build an Africa that works for the people who were shut out for centuries? Or just one that works for the richest men in the world? Because make no mistake, if billionaires can skip the rules, then the rules were never made to serve the people. This is the moment for South Africans and all Africans to speak up, to say yes to innovation, yes to investment, but never at the expense of justice. And to our leaders, you were not elected to accommodate inequality. You were elected to dismantle it. So what do you think, my people? Should South Africa make this exception for Elon Musk? Does economic transformation still matter? Or are we trading our power for progress again? Let me know in the comments, because what I believe is that justice isn't just a policy. It's a principle. And it's time we defended it like one. but I'd love to hear your thoughts. That's it for today's show. If this episode opened your eyes, don't just scroll past it. Hit that like button, subscribe, share this with your group chats, and join our membership community where we go beyond the headlines. Thanks for watching. I'm Sandra Babu-Boateng. Until next time, take care. Hey you! Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, don't forget to subscribe and join the family. Also, visit face2faceafrica.com for your daily news and updates on what's going on within the global Black community so you can stay informed.